Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't make this giant wealth mistake. Understand why a high salary does not create wealth. Learn what does instead. See how to get deep-pocketed banks like Chase and Wells Fargo to build wealth for you. I recently sat down with a traditional financial advisor. This got interesting. Then, why do Western U.S. homes cost more than Eastern U.S. homes? All today on Get Rich Education. When you want the best real estate and finance info, the modern internet experience limits your free articles access, and it's replete with paywalls, and you've got pop-ups and push notifications and cookies disclaimers. Ugh. At no other time in history has it been more vital to place nice, clean, free content into your hands that actually adds no hype value to your life. See, this is the golden age of quality newsletters, and I write every word of ours myself. It's got a dash of humor, and it's to the point. To get the letter, it couldn't be more simple. Text GRE to 66866, and when you start the free newsletter, you'll also get my 1-hour fast real estate course completely free. It's called the Don't Quit Your Daydream Letter, and it wires your mind for wealth. Make sure you read it. Text GRE to 66866. Text GRE to 66866.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Port Jervis, New Jersey to the port of Bellingham, Washington, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold, and you're listening to Get Rich Education. Welcome in. When I grew up, I thought that wealthy people got wealthy from high salaries. I figured that I could get wealthy if I got a high salary too. And then adulthood has proven to me that they don't. People don't get wealthy from high salaries. They get wealthy by owning things. Let's break this down. People don't get wealthy from high salaries. In fact, have you ever seen this happen anywhere? I mean, I haven't. And I have worked as an employee in both the public sector and the private sector. And I've been a longtime real estate investor and an entrepreneur. I've done all those things already. In fact, how would anyone even get wealthy from a high salary? How would that even work? If you've got a job, you're trading your time for dollars and you're selling your time for money. And I think most people would agree that wealth is freedom. I mean, I used to do that activity too. And I actually think that everyone might get some perspective by having a taste of that. Most people get that taste. And say you're even entrenched in the game of climbing the corporate ladder to a progressively higher and higher salary. Well, first, in my experience, many job promotions, they get you perhaps 10 to 30% more in salary, but 2 times to 4 times the responsibility. That's 200% to 400% more responsibility. Even if there's an edge case here in your situation in climbing the corporate ladder, where does that even get you in the end? Where do you end up? I mean, look at your supervisor and their lifestyle. Is that what you want to be? And look up higher at your supervisor's supervisor. What's their life like? Is that the life that you really want if you're designing one for yourself? Is that what you aspire to be and expend so much of your most precious resources to get there? Time, including time away from your family, energy, skill, potential. Is that really and truly it? The answer is right in front of you. Look at others. People don't get wealthy from high salaries. People get wealthy from owning things. We'll get more on how, if you have average means, on just how you can own many things shortly. But first, let me address any more hangups you might have if you still think that high salaries can create wealth. We won't even look at sort of common jobs like an IT specialist or a systems analyst, or a plumber. Let's take an edge case, a classically high-paid profession, a doctor, a surgeon, a specialist even, highly compensated, several $100,000 in salary each year. I know some of them, and I also know a bunch of resident doctors too, and I talk with them. Okay, resident doctors, they're basically finished with their formal schooling, and they're doctors in training. They are repaying loan amounts that are deep into the six figures after undergrad pre-med and after they had a few more years at medical school. And it seems like they often have something like $400,000 in student loan debt that they have to pay back in the case of these resident doctors. But that's besides the point. It's common for these, we'll say, specialist physicians, once they start working, to work as a doctor for, say, 58 hours a week or 71 and a half hours a week. Now, I said that high salaries don't create wealth. How wealthy are you if undergrad, if after more time at med school, and 3 years of low-paid residency, you finally get out of all that, you're in your 30s or older, and you're working 60-plus hours a week? I mean, 60-plus hours a week, that is not my idea of wealth and freedom at all. And you know what else? When you pursued a specialty track like that, which often comes with loads of debt, you are in so deep in that profession. You've invested so much time and energy and chapters of your life into that field that you cannot pivot to another career, even if you wanted to. You're trapped. I mean, entrapment, that is the very opposite of wealth and freedom. Understand now? I just went out and gave an example of perhaps the highest salary person that I can think of to prove my point here. And you've got to wonder, where does that leave you? And you probably heard the end game trope about climbing the corporate ladder by now. Yep, you spent the best years of your life climbing the corporate ladder, only to find at the end, at the top, that the ladder was leaning up against the wrong wall the whole time. Because high salaries don't make people wealthy, then how do people get wealthy from owning things? Well, there are two main ways. First, you can launch and own a business, or secondly, there is real estate. Now, launching and owning a business takes a ton of entrepreneurial ambition and risk, and you've got to have a novel idea, a new idea that creates value for the world. And this can be a worthwhile venture, and successful entrepreneurs, they create value for the world with their own business. I mean, it's terrific, it's capitalistic, it's turning lower use resources into higher use resources. But unless you have your own money, you're going to have to be scrappy and resilient for a long time, because it is really hard to get loans for a new unproven business. And if you hire anyone to help you, you need to quickly have the ability to produce enough income so that you've got leftover profit, paying for all your overhead expenses, your software subscriptions, paying your help, maybe paying rent on a space, and still having enough left over after all that to fuel your own lifestyle. Household names like becoming the next Apple or Facebook, they are one in a million, and you sure don't have to be the next Apple or Facebook, but it is tough. So the first way is by owning a business, and the second way is by owning real estate. New businesses are unproven. Real estate is proven. Like I say, wealthy people's money either starts out in real estate or ends up in real estate. But how do you own much real estate? Because it's expensive, and wealth is created by owning things. The answer is with prudent loans. Because real estate is proven, banks will give you loans. Lots of them. Have good credit. Be credit worthy. And being credit worthy, that should be an innate trait in any virtuous human being, because it shows that you repay the debts that you owe. I think when it comes to debt, debt is like fire. You don't let a little kid play with fire. They'll burn down the house. Leave fire to adults. They'll use it to heat the house. Leave debt to the adults. Use debt to fuel your lifestyle, fuel your ambitions, and fuel your opportunities. to the scarcity mindset of all debt is bad, here at GRE we say you're an adult, grow up. Learn that debt is leverage and your debt isn't paid back by you. Tenants and inflation both relentlessly and incessantly pay it down for you until they pay it off for you if you want. So then who's really funding your wealth, enabling you to own things? Who really funded my wealth from nothing, enabling me to own things? Who funded my retirement? Leverage did, from Chase Bank, Wells Fargo Bank, Bank of America, and other banks. They all give you the opportunity to let them fund your wealth for you. Now, I'm going to explain a core GRE principle here, but so that this isn't repetitive for the long-time listener, I will use a new analogy for you here. Look, let's say that you're a kid. You don't know how to responsibly use fire or debt. In fact, you're still just 4 feet tall. But learning about leverage is like seeing the light. Now, in sunlight, a 4-foot-tall kid can cast a 20-foot-tall shadow. You look like a giant now. 5-to-1 leverage made you not just grow up, but grow into a giant. I mean, you suddenly wield the power of a financial giant thanks to the banks, because with your 20% down payment, you're only putting up 1/5 of the property price. How then do these big banks make you a giant exactly? Well, let's say that your $40K down payment on a $200K income property, when the property appreciates only 4%, like real estate did last year per the NAR number, you just got a 20% return. How? Because you got a 4% return on both your $40K down and you got a 4% return on your $160K borrowed. That entire $200K capital price, you got the 4% on all of that. Yep, the return from that $160K of borrowed bank money, it didn't go to Wells Fargo. It won't go to Chase Bank. It won't go to Bank of America. It all goes to you because you leveraged them. That's how you beat the banks. That's how you build wealth. 2 years ago, when property appreciated 10% that year, you got a 50% leveraged return. And it gets better than that. You can make income property down payments even lower than 20%, like I did when I began. So a 4-foot-tall kid then that sees the light can cast an even taller shadow than 20 feet at 5-to-1 leverage, a bigger giant. And any GRE devotee knows that leveraged appreciation is one of just 5 ways you're paid. Yes, we're only talking about one here. That sounds amazing, and some think, oh, come on, there's got to be a catch. Yes, there is, but it's manageable. Leverage amplifies losses, just like gains, though it doesn't happen often. Real estate can go down in value. Even in a downturn, look at what happens between any 10-year period. Nominally, you won't find any loss of real estate value in all of modern American history, and you must manage cash flows. So, no, this is not a 6-month plan. It's to build wealth durably with a reliable vehicle in more like 5 to 10 years. It gets better as your equity grows, harvesting it out through a cash-out refinance. It maintains your magnification into a financial giant, to stick with the analogy, and every cash-out refinance that you do is a tax-free event, not tax-deferred, tax-free from Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America, and the big banks. You can make tax-free cash grabs, separating it out from your properties along the way, since the IRS doesn't classify debt windfalls as taxable income, and you have a pro property manager handling all the day-to-day for you if you prefer. And now you know why. Wealth is not created from high salaries. It's created from owning things. And you need to be more than creditworthy. You need to be strategic in building your portfolio with the right properties in the right markets. Set up a time with one of our GRE investment coaches, and they help you do exactly that for free. Either that, or you can just keep believing that high salaries create wealth. Now, a few weeks ago here on the show, I told you that I've had a sit-down meeting coming up with a conventional financial advisor, a retirement planner type of guy. I've been getting their emails and dismissing them for, 8 or 10 years, but I always stay subscribed. This is for when I used to work at a state DOT, Department of Transportation, so I finally responded, and we set up a 1-hour sit-down. We did it virtually on web conferencing. I prepared by having some things ready for him that he asked for, like my monthly cash flow statement, net worth worksheet, and he also asked that I have my Social Security statement pulled up, so I had that ready. Now, this meeting between he and I, it's not the forum for espousing GRE's proven wealth-building formula to him, no proselytizing, and he told me that I'm in really good shape when we were done. Now, he didn't dig in with questions on my backstory, like how were you able to retire at such a young age, or how did you amass all this? And yes, I could retire now. I could have a while ago. I think you know that. He was interested in knowing what the cash flow from the rental properties was. In fact, that question of his was very good. And interestingly, he really wanted to know how long I have left to pay on my rentals. Like, when would the 30-year mortgages be paid off? Oh gosh, they all have 20-some years to go. Many of them are clustered around 27 years to go. He could see that I had the ability to pay many of them off quickly if I wanted to, but he didn't tell me that I should. Of course, I wouldn't want to lose the leverage. You know, the most interesting question that this conventional financial advisor asked about these properties that I have all over the place in different states, in even nations, it wasn't a completely unreasonable question, but he asked, do you plan to live in any of those areas? And no, I don't plan to live in those properties or even in those areas. I pick investor-advantaged areas for investments at the best places across the nation and not where I want to live. Now, he encouraged me near the end to import my financial information into their retirement portal. And when I say they, he works for a private company that administers the DOT's retirement plan. You know, I had previously been reluctant to do that and share all my financials with another party, but I've got to say I've reconsidered and might enter it in there. It does some pretty impressive modeling and scenarios. And for the properties, you enter the address and they use Zillow estimated values. And it looks at how the graphs change when you get to the age of where any pensions might kick in or where Social Security payments begin. And all of those sorts of things enter your life. So, hey, all in all, maybe you thought I'd bust this guy's chops for being scarcity-minded or not about passive cash flow, but he was pretty good. It was actually an hour of my time well spent, I would even say. And again, the reason that I was able to be positioned this way comes down to relying on compound leverage, not compound interest, casting the shadow of a 20-foot tall giant compared to when you're a 4-year-old child, which is the way that a lot of people think of it. And I was also able to do this because I did not try to go the high salary route, because that is not the way to build wealth. And by the way, I do not consider myself retired. I remotely asset manage my real estate investments, and I produce this show, produce videos for our YouTube channel, write our newsletter, write for Forbes, and more. And I do that on material that's interesting to me and helps others. Hey, coming up straight ahead, why do homes in Western U.S. states cost more than homes in the East? In fact, this makes zero sense to most people because areas east of the Mississippi River are more densely populated. In fact, nearly 2/3 of Americans live on just over 1/3 of the land, suggesting that the East should clearly be pricier. Then how could the reality be opposite? It might seem weird. I'll break that down. That's coming up shortly. You're listening to Get Rich Education Podcast, episode 497. That means we're just 3 weeks away from a special milestone episode 500. I'll tell you, I sure know how to put the performance pressure on myself, don't I? Something here that we don't talk about or offer the opportunity for. If you're a business owner or decision maker and would like to advertise on our platform, well, we'd like to check you out first. Often I use the product or service myself first. Get Rich Education is ranked in the top 0.5% of listened to podcasts globally per Listen Notes, on air every single week since 2014. Some say that we were the first show to finally, clearly explain how real estate makes ordinary people wealthy. For advertising information and inquiries, visit getricheducation.com/ad. That's getricheducation.com/AD. More next. I'm Keith Weinhold. You're listening to Get Rich Education. For a lender that's a specific expert with income property, you need Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. In GRE history, from beginners to veterans, they provided our listeners with more mortgages than anyone. It's where I get my own loans for single-family rentals up to fourplexes. Start your pre-qualification and chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even customize a plan tailored to you for growing your portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com, ridgelendinggroup.com. I'll just tell you, for the most passive part of my real estate investing, personally, I put my own dollars with Freedom Family Investments because their funds pay me a stream of regular cash flow, and returns are better than a bank savings account, up to 12%. Their minimums are as low as $25K. You don't even need to be accredited for some of them. It's all backed by real estate, and I kind of love how the tax benefit of doing this can offset capital gains and your W-2 job's income. And they've always given me exactly their stated return, paid on time. So it's steady income, no surprises while I'm sleeping or just doing the things I love. For a little insider tip, I've invested in their Power Fund. To get going on that, text family to 66866. Oh, and this isn't a solicitation. If you want to invest where I do, just go ahead and text family to 66866.
Hi, this is Russell Gray, co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show, and you're listening to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
A little tribute and melodic swan song to Russell Gray there. Welcome back to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Before returning to real estate, let's do a quick first quarter asset class review. It's coming a little later than usual here, but it's good to see what the rest of the world is doing. And almost everywhere you look, asset prices are up, up, up. In real estate, as housing intelligence analyst Rick Sharga and I discussed in detail here each of the last 2 weeks, prices and sales volume for real estate are both up. The S&P 500 had its best start to a year since 2019, up 11%. The yield on the 10-year T-note was up 26 basis points. And remember that mortgage rates move closely along with that 10-year T-note. Gold was up 8% to an all-time high over $2,200, and gold even touched $2,300 here in Q2. In the first quarter, oil was up 15% to $83. Bitcoin was up 68% to $70K. And the biggest beneficiary of AI hype, NVIDIA, was up 88%. Yes, in just the first quarter. And this is even wilder. A little wild card for you here. For the first time ever, cocoa prices briefly surpassed $10,000 per metric ton. And that briefly made the confectionery commodity more valuable than copper. That's what's going on in the total investment world. Why do homes out west cost more than homes in eastern states? I mean, this fact makes zero sense to most people since the East is more densely populated. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 64.4% of Americans live east of the Mississippi River, and that's on land that's barely more than 1/3 of the U.S. because the Mississippi doesn't run right down the center. It's a little to the east of center in the contiguous states. So this means that nearly 2/3 of people live on just over 1/3 of the land. That really suggests that the East has got to be pricier. Well, what is strange to many is that, in fact, just the opposite is true. The West is pricier. So now that pandemic migration and real estate prices have settled into more normal patterns, we've taken a fresh look at prices, and this trend, which is curious to many, continues. So let me demystify it for you. And you saw a beautiful, colorful map that brilliantly demonstrates this. I sent it to you a few weeks ago if you're a Don't Quit Your Daydream letter subscriber. Now, there are some notable exceptions to the West is pricier, like New England and South Florida. Housing is expensive in densely populated northeastern cities. And New Mexico is an outlier, is a cheap Western state. And no, the West is not pricier because the Kardashians' lavish $200 million total portfolio of California real estate skews the entire nation. Here's my more, I suppose, scholarly breakdown. Yes, one of my degrees was in geography before I became a real estate investor. The first reason is new. I mean, the West has more new build homes, so therefore higher costs of land and labor and materials that all got priced in. And Eastern homes are older because it's closer to Europe's diaspora, where the U.S.'s early immigration was heaviest. And then there's the factor of the feds. And no, I'm not talking about Jerome Powell's Fed here. It's that over 90% of federal land is located out west, and no building is typically allowed on these lands. So that makes the developable land more scarce. And this really helps explain why whenever you see huge swaths of undeveloped land while you're flying over the West, and you think, oh, there's just boundless room for growth and sprawl here. Well, oftentimes in reality, there is not. Another reason is 3D, 3 dimensions. Maps are 2D and the world is 3D. Western housing is expensive because you have scenarios like port cities surrounded by mountains and high deserts. So therefore, developable land is more scarce than it seems. That makes demand exceed supply in more places out west than what one might think. San Francisco is confined by the bay and hills. Seattle is confined to an isthmus. Salt Lake City is next to the Wasatch Range. Alaska looks enormous, but they've got a lot of federal land, and nearly half of its state's population lives in the biggest city of Anchorage, and Anchorage is sandwiched between water, mountains, and that aforementioned federal land. What are we up to now? The fourth reason, well, it really is California dreaming. Despite recent domestic out-migration from California and the Kardashians aside, it really does help tilt the balance. People are attracted to SoCal's Mediterranean climate such that nearly 1 in 8 Americans are still cooling in Cali with a median home price of $737,700. That climate desirability drives up prices, and much of California also has these layers, just myriad codes and limits and regulations, like, for example, solar panels added to new construction that can increase a home's cost $25,000 or more alone. And the next reason Western homes cost more than Eastern homes is what I'll call down by the river.
First off, I am 35 years old. I am thrice divorced, and I live in a van down by the river.
Yeah, famous classic comedy sketch there with the late Chris Farley. The East has the Great Lakes and more rivers. It costs 1/12 as much to transport goods and housing materials over water than it does land. And this is a fact that has been stated on this show previously. It was first brought up a few years ago when we had geopolitical strategist Peter Zion here to discuss the geography of real estate with me. A river city like Memphis is a gigantic transportation hub. For example, they're on the river. Memphis has other transportation factors as well. So this keeps the costs down for all kinds of consumer goods and building materials That makes for a lower cost of living and, in turn, property prices. Then there's quaking. There is more seismicity out west. Well, it costs more to build to those construction standards. For example, California and Washington have build expenses that are 20% plus more expensive than they are in a lot of southeastern states. There are more fires in the western U.S., tornadoes in the middle, and hurricanes in the east. Jobs is another reason. It takes more high-paying jobs to attract new residents and get them to uproot and move to the faster-growing West. Well, higher incomes buy pricier homes. The East has tons of jobs going for it, too. In fact, the Northeast, that might be the world's most productive region. New York City, Boston, Philly, D.C. But out in Appalachia and elsewhere, there are some waning business sectors like various heavy industries and coal, but most of the ones that were going to move out already have moved out decades ago. Much of that down drain is over with. And the last reason is what I'll call, I can see clearly now. The West has mountain and desert views. These can be seen from further away than eastern forest and flatter areas and Piedmont landscapes. The East has a lot of lake and river view properties, though, and there they are. 8 reasons why Western homes cost more than Eastern homes, and now you know why West Virginia has million-dollar homes so big that you can get lost indoors, and in coastal Cali, it seems like $1 million gets you little more than a ramshackled pool house. Now, of course, at times I've had to make gross generalizations about such a vast nation of 340 million people and so many areas and variables. Otherwise, if I went on, this episode could be a few hours long. As I discuss those, I'm sure you could think to yourself at times, hey, I believe there's an exception to that criterion. I want to tell you why all of that matters to you shortly. But yes, there are some ironies to point out here, though. The Western U.S. has lands that are arid and inhospitable, and what some describe as wastelands, like 4 deserts. Well, the invention of the air conditioner, it made those places more livable, more hospitable. And the West also has the most beautiful national parks. That's almost not debatable. And then, hey, some find places in the East inhospitable, like, say, Michigan's Upper Peninsula in March. Now, I like a change in seasons myself, coming from Pennsylvania like I do, but some don't. You've got to serve real estate to where people want to own and want to rent. Florida has not been thought of as a mosquito-infested, human, miserable swamp since last century. Today, it's livable and desirable to a lot of people. Now, there are some other factors in addition to those main 8 reasons I mentioned on why Western U.S. homes cost more than those in the East, from a slavery legacy to unionization and more. I've been hitting on the big ones here. Real estate has made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else. When you're on our website, GRE Marketplace, and hover over the blue Invest button, you'll notice that most long-term rental investor markets are in the East. There's a reason. Rents are strong relative to this low purchase price that I just discussed. And now you know more of the whys behind the Eastern U.S.'s lower property prices. And maybe today, I hope it's the best understanding that you ever had for why this is the case. We buy in strategically chosen growth areas that tend to be more east than west. That's a big part of the reason. And really, all this is part of the progression of this very show. We began in 2014 with this podcast and other real estate investor education, and we still lead with this. But the next thing listeners wanted to know is where they could find properties conducive to our wealth building strategy, and we added that at GRE Marketplace. Yet that still wasn't enough, because I noticed that some of you still wanted to build your wealth with real estate now that you understood how, but you needed to make it easier to have your questions answered, or find a mortgage lender or a property insurer, or find just the right property in the right market that fits your specific goals. So Starting more than 2 years ago, we added investment coaching, and it's still free, just like everything else that we do here. And our coaches are real people, and they are real, direct real estate investors, just like you are or want to be, and just like I am. Our coaches simply have more experience doing it than most people do, because knowledge is not power, but knowledge plus action is power. I often like to leave you with something actionable that's really going to help you out at the close of the show. If you didn't already know, you can find properties and a coach at GREMarketplace.com. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.